All right, everyone, I want to welcome you to our Lunch and Learn series. This is our video boot camp for the month, and we're going to start off with Danae Wolf, who is with Extension, and she's going to be talking to you guys about the planning steps that you need to do to have these fabulous videos. So let me just turn it over to you, Danae. Feel free to fill in any details there.
Yes, thank you so much. So for those who don't know me, I am Danae Wolf. I am the Educational Technology and Digital Engagement Specialist for Ohio State University Extension. And we're going to be talking about sort of like the pre-work, the homework stuff that you can do before you create a video. The reason why I wanted to do this session is because I have a lot of people come to me and say, Danae, I produced this video or this piece of digital content, and now I don't know where to post it. I don't know who it should go to. I don't really know what to do with it. And I always kind of have to start from square one, like, okay, well, why did you produce a video? Basically, you should never like produce a piece of content without knowing for whom you're creating it, why you're creating it, like what are the goals and objectives. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is sort of providing a little bit of a framework. You might not use every single element of this framework that I'm going to present to you today, but hopefully you can pick out at least some pieces and parts that you can use and employ in not just video production, but really all digital content creation that you might be doing. So before I share my PowerPoint, I'd like to get a sense from you all about what types of videos you either are already creating or are interested in creating. Do you have an idea for a video that you want to produce? And everybody has audio rights, so it'd be great if you can talk. You can also use the chat box if you'd prefer that. So Denise said training videos, probably for master gardeners, I assume, Denise. So probably like instructional videos, videos teaching people how to do probably something explicit.
I'm Ling Ying Zhao and FAB department. I'm also extension specialist. Sometimes I using video for tour of the farms, you know, because farm has biosecurity requirement. Not everyone can see inside.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do that. And also I work on a project called Green Home Technology Center. So we are creating virtual tours of emerging green home. So introduce all these good features of the green homes. Hopefully people look at that can get some idea.
Not be able to show people an on-farm tour, but doing like a virtual tour is awesome. And then a virtual tour of green home, showing people different elements of that home. That's awesome. Yeah. Instructional videos for 4-H, educational videos on topics, educational, promotional, educational for ATI admissions. This is perfect. I know we had some admissions folks on here. We have a lot of departmental folks on here. Is anybody producing videos specific for like classroom audiences only, like for students? I assume we have at least some people doing that. Dina, anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And I have a USDA Higher Education Challenge Grant. So basically we try to convert our learning into e-learning. So we, as a bunch of, you know, like senior faculty, we create all the PPT. I kind of try to ask them to convert to this like 7 minutes type of teaching video material. We're struggling on that. That's why I come to this, you know, workshop, try to learn from you and how to effectively converting our traditional teaching material in PPT into a live teaching.
Something that's a little bit more engaging, visually appealing. So I see some other people talking about like classroom, like students for classes. Yeah, your primary audience. So that's wonderful. So the first thing that I'll start by saying is when we say video, people have different definitions of what video means to them. I work with some audiences in Extension who, when you say video, they're thinking of just a narrated PowerPoint presentation, and that's a video, right? And that might serve a really good like purpose for like a classroom audiences where you have like a captive audience of students who need that content. It's probably not going to be the greatest content type or video type for like posting on social media. People probably aren't going to like stop scrolling through their social media feed to watch a narrated PowerPoint. So this is where other forms of video content can really come into play, where we're actually showing like footage of anything. It could be a farm tour. It could be somebody producing a healthy meal. So regardless of what type of video you are creating, I'm hoping that this framework that I'm going to share with you today will be beneficial. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully you guys can all see that. Also going to open up the chat box So we have that here. All right, so everybody can see my PowerPoint? Yes, 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 I'm seeing yes. Good. All right, so first of all, why is video even important to begin with? Because everybody loves video. It's one of the most engaging content types. Nowadays, we even have more engaging types of video content like virtual reality, which can be really awesome and simple to do. And we have some folks in Extension who are doing work with virtual reality. So if that's something that people might be interested in, particularly for things like those farm tours and home tours, there's some pretty cool tools out there. And I'd be happy to connect with some of the folks that are doing VR here in Extension, because we could probably do like a whole other webinar on just producing VR content. So anybody else, like when you're scrolling through social media, what are the types of videos that capture your attention? What do you like to watch in videos? And maybe a better question is, what do you hate? What are the types of videos that you just don't like, that's not going to capture your attention and you're just going to scroll right by?
So there's videos of someone just talking and there's a blank wall behind them. And they're just, which might be engaging if I was in the room with them, but not when they're not well done, those types of things.
Yeah, so again, the talking head, Cassandra said, more than just a talking head video, right? Love long form conversations with experts. So that's actually really great for even like podcasting, which is typically just audio. Podcasts are like a great content type if it's just going to be like a long form conversation. Videos can add some visual appeal to content, but it doesn't always have to be in video form either. So basically video is one of the most popular content types that we tend to see out there online. I hear a lot of people when we talk about the most engaging videos, people refer to like the BuzzFeed tasty videos where they're showing recipes being made. And you typically don't see like a person's head or face. It's just like hands putting ingredients in a bowl and then it pops into the oven and then it comes out instantly and it's this beautiful cooked meal. So these are all different forms of video content that we tend to really enjoy seeing. Keeping video focused and not all over the place. Brief, yes. What is the ideal length for a video? Does anybody want to share your insights? And the answers are going to be different depending on your audience and depending on where that video is posted. So some people say 5 minutes. Well, what if we're talking about an hour-long classroom-based lecture? Maybe it's an online course. Is it going to be a 5-minute video?
It still won't be 60 minutes though. So maybe like a 10, 15-minute segment. Yeah. I hope all my teachers hear me say that.
Yes, maybe a 10 or 15-minute long video. Maybe a series of smaller videos where you have like different content that's intermixed with the videos, right? So maybe you have a quiz, maybe you have some PowerPoint slides, and maybe you have a video that you show for reference, and then you go back to some other content type. So the answer is really, it depends. So how do we choose topics? Well, we can choose topics based on important issues in our community. We have a lot of Extension folks on today. So topics might just be like important issues that you want to talk about, relevant issues, timely issues. It might be your area of specialization. So faculty who are on the call today, Extension educators and specialists who are on the call today, you probably have an area of specialization. So your topic just might happen to kind of focus on that area. It might also be a topic that you have to teach because it's part of your class objectives or goals. So that's something else that we need to be aware of. So some questions to consider before you just jump into producing a video. One of the biggest questions that you might ask yourself is, are there other videos that have already been created or that other entities or organizations have created that we can just direct our learners or our audience to? Do we really have to take the time and effort to produce a video if there's already something else out there? In Extension, we get different types of audiences, right? So some audiences might be perfectly fine with us sending them to a video that maybe Michigan State produced that's really relevant to the question that they asked. Other people might say, you know what, why are you directing me to Michigan State? You're Ohio State and you should be answering my question, or directing me to content that is Ohio State based. So these are some of the questions you have to consider. Should you spend time and resources in recreating a piece of content where all of that content is already available in something that someone else produced? And then also ask yourself, are there any partners, colleagues, peers, other offices or departments that you can partner with that might help you create this piece of content? You don't always have to go it alone. So are there other entities in place that might be able to help you? So now we're going to get into the framework portion of this video production session. So you have to ask yourself, who are your stakeholders? So for those on the call today, again, you can just type into the chat box, or you can just say it over audio. Who are some of the stakeholders that you are working with to produce video content? Who's your audience? Farmers, prospective students, unmotivated students. Yeah, good one. The general public, 4-H, undergrads, distance learners, good one. The general public for a lot of us who work in extension. Professional development, yeah, Jared, professional development. Like, you are my primary audience because I work in professional development. So I have to relate this content specifically to you and your needs. Urban extension educators, so again, mostly professional development, internal. It's important that you are producing content that resonates with your various audiences. If you are a faculty member and you're producing a piece of video content, you need to understand that you're going to have different learners in your classroom. You're going to have people who are there because they have to take that class because it's a class requirement to graduate. And you're going to have people who are taking that class because it's an elective and they are genuinely interested in that topic and might need it in their career. So how might you produce content that meets the needs of both of those learners? This person just needs to pass the class, right? This other person really needs to take this content and be able to apply it to their work. And those are completely different objectives that you might have then with those audiences. Why is the topic important to them? What is it that they need to know? What are they going to be able to do with this content? And then the biggest question is, how can we best hook them? So my background is in environmental education. I come from the National Park Service. I used to work as an interpretive park ranger, and interpretation runs so deeply into what I do even today in extension. Does anybody know what interpretation is? If you had to like sum up interpretation, and this is so relevant to education, this is why I'm asking this. What is interpretation? I'm gonna wait and see if anybody's typing into the chat box. Opinion? Not really opinion. Reaching an audience, connecting to an audience. Exactly. It's basically how we translate our content into a form that's going to resonate best with our audience. And we do this typically by creating an emotional or an intellectual hook to that audience. So just as an example, one of my areas of specialization when I was working for the Park Service was invasive plants. Now, I could talk all day long about facts about invasive plants. I could, teach people about how to identify multiflora rose or garlic mustard or whatever, and people would just tune out and stop listening. How would you translate invasive plant content in a way that's going to hook somebody emotionally? Does anybody else work in invasive species at all?
I have in the past, but my audience was usually interested in it, right? So I'm thinking, do you like portray it like the zombies are coming to attack you kind of thing or something?
Yeah, so that's one like sort of interpretive message that you could use. Explain how, so Jason, explain how things they love are threatened. So you have to create that emotional hook. So in Cuyahoga Valley National Park, we had tons of people who loved birds. They were birders. And if you know anything about birders, they are super passionate about birding. So I could talk all day long about identifying invasive plants and here's what to do with them, da, da, da. But as soon as I started to talk about, invasive plants are actually threatening bird populations because invasive plants are known scientifically to have less insect biomass. And the less insects we have, or the fewer insects we have, the fewer birds we're going to have. All of a sudden, people are now, they're interested because I've just connected that topic that was before completely irrelevant to them and their lives. I've connected it to something that they're passionate about. This is what we do in extension. This is what we do in all education. We translate science in a way that's going to resonate with our audience and provide impact to them. So in reality, we are all interpreters. We are all science communicators. So with any given topic that you might be teaching about, we have various audience segments. And then within each of those audience segments, we're also going to have marketing channels that will be best to reach those individuals. So does somebody want to throw out in the chat box, or you can say it out loud if you're connected by mic, does anybody want to throw out a very specific topic that you are hoping to create a video about? And try to be as specific as possible. Helmet safety, awesome. All right, helmet safety. Who are the various audience segments that need to know about helmet safety? And anybody can participate here. So 4-H youth, parents, advisors. And then how are we going to best reach each of these audience segments? How are we best going to reach our 4-H youth? Social media, something cool. Yeah, so this is where we start to dig a little bit deeper and identify if I'm producing a video and I want my youth, like some like high school audience, middle school audience, elementary school audience, how am I best going to get this content to them? YouTube would be a great way to do that. Something like Snapchat, which I'm not a huge fan of Snapchat myself because I don't really know how to use it, but Snapchat might be another good way. If you want to reach the parents of those children, what's the best marketing channel to reach them? Again, it might be YouTube, might be Facebook, because a lot of them are going to be on Facebook. It might be other forms of social media too. So for each one of your videos ideas, when you start to sit down and really think about how am I going to create this video, you also have to think about like, where is this video going to be hosted and how am I going to disseminate it to my audience? And it's usually not just a one size fits all, right? You're going to have various audience segments and then you have to have various channels through which you're pushing that content out. Now, on the next slide here, we have those same audience segments, and now we have interpretive themes. So for 4-H youth and helmet safety, what is one emotional or intellectual connection that we can reach the youth that we are trying to encourage to wear helmets? What is one way that we can frame helmet safety that will resonate with kids? Again, anybody can shout out answers here or type them into the chat box. Good question. That's why you're here, right? You're trying to figure that out. So, I mean, how do we make this a cool, hip topic for kids to be like, oh yeah, maybe I should wear a helmet?
A celebrity has to demonstrate.
Oh, maybe a celebrity. Yeah. So maybe a celebrity demonstrating it. Now, as we go on to the parents, how might we make this relevant to the parents? This is where we maybe start to talk a little bit about the safety or the, like if you take a bad fall, I'm assuming we're talking about since like 4-H youth, like wearing a helmet if you're biking or skateboarding or skating or something, or horseback riding. Yeah, so maybe you could do sort of pictures of accidents. Like this is what happens if you don't wear a helmet. Or on the converse, you might have, you know, this is what happens if you did wear a helmet. It might be, you know, pictures of things like, you know, here's a fractured skull as a result of falling off a bike. You could do this in a variety of ways, but you have to find that emotional hook that really captures people into that specific topic. Does that make sense to everybody? Or does anybody have, for kids, maybe tell them to keep their brain safe with a cartoon brain? Yeah, like tell them maybe about how the brain works and why the brain is so fundamental to our health and well-being, right? You could even, and this might seem kind of far, but you could even go in, as you think about like producing a video to drive home the importance of helmet safety, could you go out and interview individuals who have dealt with a traumatic brain injury as a result of not wearing a helmet and taking a bad fall and showing how different their life is now post-injury than maybe it was pre-injury? And I see that type of format done a lot with like texting and driving, like messages about, you know, don't text and drive. You see somebody who was like perfectly healthy, you know, pre-accident, and then somebody was texting and driving and it, you know, they got hit by somebody. and now their life is completely different. And that really drives it home because that makes it real. It's not some abstract thing now. It's a real thing that happened to a real person, and this can happen to you too. And this is why this topic is so important. So those are some ideas that that you can do as you think about interpretive themes. Any questions so far? Yeah, we're just like feeding you different ideas. But these are the things, and you could even brainstorm. So everything that we're talking about here today, like bring some of the folks that you might be working with, some of your peers, into a room together and talk through some of these ideas. How can we best do this? You can have a face-to-face brainstorm session. You can do this through email. You can hop onto a Zoom call for a half hour and just say, let's brainstorm some ideas for how we can interpret or frame this content in a way that will resonate with our audience.
So Danae, I'm going to interrupt real quick here. I'm thinking of those of us in an academic setting where we don't have the luxury, you know, we're not going to put that much energy into one video.
Exactly.
But I think the take-home message I'm hearing from you there, though, is we shouldn't assume this cool science topic that's really cool to us is resonating with our students. So we may need to think of a better way to introduce it or frame it. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, how do you frame the content so so your students are not just going to look at it as like, oh, this is just something I have to do to, like, you know, pass this assignment, but something that's like, oh, you know what, this is actually relevant to my life, but I didn't realize that it was before. So you're right, Dina, and that's the thing that I wanted to drive home too here, is that sort of the video storytelling that we're going to be talking about today, you're going to notice it is kind of geared towards almost, I don't want to say high production videos, because these videos can be as like low production or high production as you want. It could be you in a studio talking about this. But again, you have to frame the content in a very specific way so that your audience is actually interested in it. Otherwise, they're not even going to bother to watch the whole video. So do your homework ahead of time to ensure success with your video. So I just wanted to run through just a very quick idea. And again, this topic is not going to be relevant to everybody on the call here today. It's just one example. So what if we had a topic of getting kids to eat healthy? I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. My 2-year-old will eat like anything that you put in front of him. My 4-year-old is a pretty picky eater. Does anybody else have picky eaters? Yeah, a lot of people probably have dealt with this if you have kids. And healthy eating is, Jared's like, yes, I do, in all caps. So yeah, this is a topic that's relevant to a lot of different people, and it might even be relevant beyond just parents, right? It might be relevant to daycare centers. It might be relevant to grandparents who are babysitting. And it's certainly relevant to a lot of our extension audiences, right? Getting people to eat healthier. So now what we want to do, and again, this is something that you can take or leave. You don't have to develop out a learner profile, but it's an activity that I really like to do, because you're basically saying, who am I producing this video for? Who is this content for? And how can I produce it in a way that's going to really resonate with this individual person? So if you were talking about kids eating healthy meals, what's an example of an audience that this would be relevant to? Parents. So parents is probably going to be one of the biggest audience segments. So let's create a learner profile for a parent. Let's just say that we have a single mom who works full time. She has 2 young children. She's 35 years old. She's working a lot of hours. Let's just say she works as like an RN. She works as a nurse in a hospital. And then as we think about like her lifestyle and her schedule, part of her problem in being able to feed her children healthy meals is that she has an hour commute both ways to work. So she's working an 8-hour shift plus 2 hours of commute. She's gone for 10 hours a day. She's coming home at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. She doesn't want to spend all of the free time that she has as a single parent with her children. She doesn't want to spend all that time in the kitchen producing healthy meals. So instead, she chooses to produce maybe less healthy meals so that she has a little bit more time with her kids. So her schedule's a little bit crazy. Maybe her kids are in some extracurricular activities. Now, how might we be able to help this person? So what information does this person need from me? Let's just say my area of specialization is healthy eating, and I want to produce a video on healthy eating. What does this person need? Quick, easy recipes. That's one idea. What else? What else might we be able to provide to this person? Nutritional information. Meal prep. Meal prep's huge. Yeah. Common ingredient use, cooking with kids. That's huge. Like, let's involve the kids in this activity. If she wants to be spending more quality time with her kids, let's bring the kids into the kitchen. Reassurance that she's a good mom. That's excellent. Strategies to get her kids to try new foods, shopping list suggestions. What if this person happens to live in the inner city? Maybe she lives in what would be considered a food desert, and she doesn't feel like she has a lot of great, easy access to healthy, nutritious foods. Then what resources might we be able to give to her? Again, we're sort of starting to create a storyline here, a narrative. Best bets for, yeah, fast. Offer ideas for meal substitution. So canned veggies or maybe frozen veggies. Yeah. So these are some different things that we can do. Maybe even resources for, you know, maybe she doesn't realize that there's a farmer's market around the corner. She thought that she lived in a food desert, but now we can give her resources that, like, hey, there's a farmer's market that goes on during the warm season. So what's going to stand, indoor gardening? That's a great one, Valerie. So what stands between this person and meeting success? What is going to prevent this person from being successful in feeding her kids healthy, nutritious meals? Well, we talked about some, like time, right? Her schedule is pretty limited. So time's going to be a big one. Maybe money. She's a single parent. So she's a, you know, single income family. So maybe she doesn't have a ton of money, and that might be an issue. And then we sort of identify which ones of these conflicts are internal versus external. So why do we do that? Well, because internal conflicts we can probably solve. External conflicts we probably can't solve. So if her biggest issue is I don't feel like I have a ton of time in my schedule, one of the things that we would not focus on is, hey, maybe you should find a new job where, you know, you can have more time with your kids. That's like an external conflict that we're not going to be able to solve in like a video that we can produce to help this person. So the internal conflicts would be things like, let's save time on meal prep. Let's save some money and like meal substitute or like food substitutions. Are you kind of starting to see like this framework for how we can identify like what exactly is the content that we should be focusing on, which, as opposed to which content can we leave behind because we can't really solve that problem? And then we have different story frameworks that we can focus on. So what solutions can I offer this person? And how can I help my learner achieve success? So we talked a little bit about like meal prep. Meal prep's a great one. Let's say we want to produce a 5-part video series. And again, you guys might be thinking, well, 5 videos, like that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in like one simple video to show this one topic in my classroom. That's okay. But how can you help your learner achieve success? We're going to focus on a 5-part series on meal prep. And we're going to talk about saving time, saving money, getting your kids involved, and then maybe you have some other topics that you want to include in there. Now you think about how you're going to frame this content. We have a positive framing and we have a negative framing. This goes back to that helmet experience. If you think about a positive framing for wearing a helmet, the positive framing would be, if you wear a helmet, you will be preventing injuries, versus a negative framing, which would be, if you don't wear a helmet, these are all the negative things that can happen to you. So these are different ways of basically communicating the same general content, the same general idea, but we're framing it in an entirely different way to resonate with different audiences. So if our single mother takes the information that we're giving to her and she uses it, she puts that information to good use, what might that look like for her? Well, she's going to have more time with her kids. She's going to be probably preventing maybe different nutritional issues in her children. So maybe she can prevent diabetes, prevent heart disease, prevent obesity in her children. Maybe she'll feel like she'll have more energy because she's eating healthier. Versus a negative framing. So what might the negative framing look like? If this single mom continues on her current path of feeding her children unhealthy meals, she's stressed out because she feels like she's not a good mom, she feels like she's not spending enough time with her kids. If she doesn't take this content and use it, what might that look like for her kids? Yeah, maybe we can talk about, you know, if you continue down this path, your kids might suffer from obesity or heart disease or diabetes. Anything else? we can talk a little bit just about sort of the stress of, you know, working a lot, and yeah, so your own mental health, right? So these are ways that you can just be more mindful. And again, this goes back to this storyline that we're trying to create in this video. Now, I know this seems like a lot of work. You're probably like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that like I had to think about so many different things if I just want to produce this simple video. But we go back to this idea that if you want to produce a video that's going to be really impactful, these are some of the things that you might just want to start to think about or build out before you create that video. So for negative framing, it's the same as positive, but we're taking a look at if our learner doesn't take this content, then what might their life look like? And going back to that helmet example, that's a really great example, because if you don't wear a helmet, here's like all the negative stuff that can happen. So there's a couple different very common what we call like TV tropes or movie tropes that we tend to see. And these are just a couple additional examples of how you can frame a video. The first one is hero's journey. So has anybody heard of hero's journey before? It's a very commonly used in movies. And I would invite you to type in the chat box or just say in your microphone a movie that maybe follows this hero's journey mindset that you know of. There's a couple great ones out there. Almost every movie follows like any like action adventure movie. Braveheart. Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is a great example. Forrest Gump, Rocky. Yeah, so basically the hero's journey. And if you actually look this up online, I want to say it's like a 12-part like framework. I tried to pull some of the pieces that I thought would be most relevant to the types of videos we would be producing in Extension and CFAES. So basically, you have like the departure, right? So you meet the hero. Who is the hero in Lord of the Rings? I'll be honest, I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan. So you guys can help me out with this. I've watched them. So yeah, Frodo. Frodo is our hero, right? So then we identify like the hero has a problem. What's the problem here? What's Frodo's problem? What does he have to do? He needs to get rid of the One Ring. All right. So in our single mother example, our hero is this single mother. And what's her problem? She doesn't have a lot of time to make healthy, nutritious food for her kids. That's the problem. Then we sort of have the initiation, like what are we going to do about it? So in Lord of the Rings, what's sort of the solution? What needs to happen? Frodo needs to take this ring to, again, I'm not a huge fan, the big mountain with the lava, dropping in lava, thank you, Mordor. So he needs to like throw this ring in like the lava mountain, right? And get rid of it and then like save the world. And of course, there's this whole storyline that like goes into that, right? Like everything that Frodo has to go through and, you know, how difficult it is. And then, hey, Frodo drops the ring in the lava and gets rid of it. And now like everything is, you know, good again. And then he gets to go back to his hobbit town. I can't remember the name of it. And everything is great. And everything is like sunshine and butterflies. And his Sam is his friend, right? Like he gets married and he has these like beautiful curly headed kids and everything is like wonderful again. So then you have sort of the return of like what happens. Well, the hero returns happy. So in our case, the single mother, the hero, of course, is our single mother. The solution that she tries is meal prepping. So she spends a couple of hours on Saturday or Sunday in the kitchen with her kids in this like creative, awesome time where she's meal prepping with her family. And then now she has more time during the week because she's done all this meal prep stuff. She returns happy. And then in our videos, because they tend to be educational videos, there's sort of a call to action, which is basically the what can you do? In other words, the people who are viewing this video, what can they do to have this same success, to be the hero of their own story? What are some examples of calls to action that you all use in the content that you produce or the educational materials that you disseminate?
Rotate herbicide modes of action.
Rotate herbicide modes of action. All right, so it's a very specific one about like pesticide application, right? So
right.
Here is a call to action that we're telling you to do, and you will be successful. In this case, it would be if you meal prep, you take some time on the weekend to meal prep, you will be successful too. So that's that sort of call to action that you're giving to your viewers to do something. Now, another common TV trope that we tend to see is this problem, agitate, solve. And this basically, we show viewers what their problem is. You don't have time, you don't have energy to meal prep, you want to spend time with your kids. Here's why you have the problem. You're not meal prepping. And here's what you can do about it. You can meal prep, right? Super, super simple framework. Can anybody give me a general idea of where we tend to see this happen a lot? And as soon as I say it, I know you guys are going to go like, yes, infomercials, right? You have this big problem, like some of the famous infomercials. It's like, you know, people trying to, I don't know, like take a pot across their kitchen or something. And they're like, oh, I'm so unbalanced and the handles of my pot don't work well. And then they like drop this whole plate of pasta all over their floor. And it shows them like in tears, like, oh my gosh, I just dropped dinner all over the floor. And then here's why you have the problem. Oh, because your pots aren't great. And then here's the solution, this new and improved pot that you can use. So we tend to see that problem a lot. So how might we use that common trope in a video that we produce? Well, here's a problem. You don't have enough time with your kids. You're not feeding them healthy, nutritious meals. Here's why you have the problem. You're limited on time. And here's how to solve that problem. Save yourself time by meal prepping on the weekends. It's as simple as that. Now, I'm going to give you guys a minute or two to apply any of the frameworks that we just talked about, either in their entirety or in pieces and parts, to any of the topics that you are interested in producing a video around. And then if you, again, everybody has mic access, so I invite you to use your microphone. It's a little bit easier than like typing it all out. Or you can type it in the chat box if you would like. But think about how you might apply any of these frameworks, whether it's sort of a positive framework, a negative framework, like the hero's journey, this problem, agitate, solve. How might you apply that to any video that you produce, whether it's for a classroom or whether it's for a public audience that we might be working with an extension? Might be a little challenging. Does anybody have some ideas in mind? Again, I'll give you a minute or two to just kind of think through this. Why isn't my garden producing? So maybe you have like a home garden and it's not very productive. So what are some of the issues that might be? Well, it could be pests, could be bad soil. It could be any number of different things. It could be like disease that's happening. So you could actually produce several different videos that would be relevant to different issues, right? I'm afraid my child will eat a poison mushroom. That's a new one. So how might you produce a video that would, and again, you don't have to answer like exactly how you might produce a video, but just things to think about, like how might you produce a video that would be relevant to this topic? You don't know how to ID mushrooms. That's your problem, right? So that's great. Like if you're thinking about the framework, so here's the problem. My child might eat a poisonous mushroom. The problem is I don't know how to identify mushrooms. So here's the solution. Here are 3 features of poisonous mushrooms. There you go. And you could produce like a 2 to 3 minute video that just kind of goes through that with some pictures, some video footage, you talking. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other things that you can include in your video too as we go through the rest of the session here. So it's as simple as that. Like and who might your audience be for that? Well, probably parents, right? And probably parents who might live either in this, parents who probably have some either land or they're taking their children to a park, as opposed to somebody who lives like in an apartment in the inner city who might not have access to a ton of like poisonous mushrooms. So again, thinking about who that learner might be and how you might frame this content specifically for that person. Sorry, I have like my chat box and my video, and every slide I have to like move it around because I can't see my actual slide. So just some other things to think about as you're talking about your video. think about where this video is going to be hosted. So that goes back to sort of the marketing channels. Is this video going to be posted on social media, or is it going to live exclusively in the privacy of a Carmen Canvas classroom? So it's just going to be in an online course. It's not going to be publicly viewable. What do we want our learner to do with the information? We talked a little bit already about having that call to action, and then also be thinking about what else might go with this content. So if you are producing a video on poisonous mushrooms and how to identify poisonous mushrooms, is there a fact sheet that you can also reference that says, hey, this would be a great piece of auxiliary information that would be helpful for you to reference back to, or maybe it's like an ID card that people can download. And then also, and this one gets a little bit difficult, is how are you going to measure the success of that video? If you're posting content on, let's say, YouTube or Vimeo, it's very easy to access information that gives you like reach and statistics, right? Like you might be able to say 500 people watch this video, but how do you actually measure the impact? How many people took that content and did something with it and created a behavioral change? We're not going to be talking about the really evaluating impact, but I am doing a webinar later this summer. I want to say it's in August at some point. It's part of the Extension and CFAES digital engagement webinar series that is going to be on really evaluating the success of digital content. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into that, but just be thinking about how you might measure the success of a video like that. Any questions so far about sort of digital storytelling and digital storytelling framework before we get into storyboarding your video? Can we rebrief the steps using Hero's Journey? Yeah, again, these are this is condensed steps. So if you just like Google search Hero's Journey, you'll find like there's like a full like circle thing that you can find, and it has like 12 steps, and it goes really into depth. But basically you have like the departure, like you meet the hero, the problem of the hero is identified, and then you sort of introduce what the solution is, how it worked, why it worked, and then you sort of have like this success, right? Like this is how our hero met success, and here's the call to action for how you can also meet success. So in the last few minutes that we have here today, we have about 15 minutes left, I am going to talk a little bit about storyboarding. So depending on the purpose of your video, your storyboard might be as simple as, hey, we're going into a studio space and we're going to do a single shot of sort of a talking head of somebody, you know, giving instructions on how to do something. It might be somebody talking about, you know, how to identify poisonous mushrooms. It could literally be anything. In which case your storyboard is going to be pretty simple. If you want to actually go out into the field and produce a video where you're going to have multiple shots showing multiple things, it's a good idea to have sort of this scene by scene outline. Like, what is it that you are going to actually produce? What video footage do you need to get when you're out in the field? And you typically want to start with some sort of opener. Like, how are you going to open that scene? For our kitchen example, for our single mom in the kitchen, it might be as simple as like our mom talking about the problem that she has. Like, here's who I am. I have kids. I'm a single mom. It's just sort of like introducing the context for the story. And then you kind of outline the problem statement. Then you get into the solution. And then finally the call to action. So again, very similar to kind of what we've talked about already with our digital storytelling frameworks. The reason why it's important to have a scene-by-scene outline is that you don't miss anything. Video production, especially field-based video production, if you're going to take a bunch of equipment or people out into a field to like video record something, you don't want to miss a shot. You don't want to come back to like post-processing and figure out like, oh man, I really wish I had gotten a scene of that cornfield or a scene of that farmer like looking at his plants. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're like, I really wish I had gotten that, and then you didn't. As Amy mentioned, plan extra shots just in case. It's a good idea, especially if you're doing field-based work, just to say, you know what, like you're just gonna hang out like in your kitchen, in your field, wherever you might be, and we're just gonna video record you doing your thing, because you can include that as what we call B-roll footage. And B-roll footage are basically those shots that you're going to include over top of your primary footage. So let's say you are out in maybe in a park area or in a field, and you're talking to a mushroom expert about poisonous mushrooms. And that person you might be asking them some questions like, give us the, the 3 primary ways to identify a poisonous mushroom. And you have a person just talking, and in the background, you sort of see just a field area or a park area. Over top of that person talking, you might then include what we call B-roll footage of that person looking closely at a mushroom, or maybe just pictures of a mushroom. These shots are used to enhance the primary footage. They're just sort of cutaways or cut-ins of the primary footage. It also helps provide context. So if you're producing a video like that, you could just start with, here's a shot of this person talking about poisonous mushrooms, and here's a couple pictures of poisonous mushrooms, but it's a good idea to provide broader context. So as an example, we often have in videos what we call an establishing shot, which just establishes like the actual location. It establishes the context for the shot. So in the case of interviewing somebody in a park about poisonous mushrooms, what might be an establishing shot for that? It's usually a wider angle, sort of landscape shot. People using a park, right? It could be like a pan across a different park. It could be a close-up image of like the sign of the park that says like such and such state park. It just kind of provides some context for where you are and what you're talking about. Kids on a swing, yeah, that's another great example. So for those of you who work in like admissions, I'm thinking about how you might produce a video that captures the attention of maybe a potential student. And you're going to be interviewing maybe a high school student that's really excited about, starting at ATI, for example. Well, what might an establishing shot be? Well, ATI has a lot of obviously agricultural programs, like 2-year ag programs, right? So it might be like a young high school student standing on his or her farm. Like maybe this is a farm kid that's grown up on a farm. So your establishing shot might be like, here's a whole image of like this person's farm. And then you cut into maybe a shot that kind of represents character development, right? Who is this person and why are we hearing them talk? Well, you might have an interview with them. They're talking about, I grew up on a farm. I am so excited to attend ATI next year because this is what I'm going to get. And then this is what I plan to use with my degree once I graduate. So you have sort of that sense of character development. And then you might have close-up shots. So you might have shots of this kid, like, maybe it's a dairy farm, maybe it's, agronomic crops. You might have them in their field doing something or just providing some context and some character development. If you search for different like film shots on Google, there are lists and lists of different shots that you can get to provide context and provide a certain look and feel to the video that you're producing. I'm not going to get into those nitty-gritty details here today, but it's out there. The only other thing that I want to mention here is that if you're going to be showing any sense of movement in your video, so let's say you're doing this admissions video, you're interviewing this high school student, maybe he's a senior and he's going to ATI next year. Your establishing shot might be like a sunrise coming up over the cornfield behind his home. And then the next shot might be his, like, you have the camera set up on a tripod and you just have his feet coming across the plane of focus. And in the background, you see like corn. And then the next shot might be him like going into the cornfield, like taking a closer look at corn. You want to ensure that the movement is always, it flows. So if that person is walking across the video camera from left to right, when they start to come in closer to look at that corn plant in a close-up view, you also want it to be moving from left to right. So you would be coming over their right shoulder, because if they're walking from left to right, that foot video, the leg video of them walking, and then all of a sudden you cut to a shot of them looking this way at their corn, it kind of confuses the context a little bit because there's no flow. Like all of a sudden they were moving from left to right and now they're moving from right to left, and that just provides a little bit of context confusion. So always make sure there's that continuity of flow and camera angle. And again, that gets a little bit technical. Just a few very brief words about scripting your video that I want to mention here. There's a variety of different ways that you can do this. So you can do like a word for word, like teleprompted, scripted video. This might be you sitting in a studio space and you just have like a script that you're like, we have to get this content out. There is a teleprompter app that I downloaded on my phone for free that allows you to just import a script basically. And then you identify how big you want that text and how fast you want it to scroll. And then you can just like read. You can have that set up like near whatever camera you're using to video record yourself, and it's just flowing and you're just reading off of that. That's okay. I have done that type of video before and it works semi well, especially in a pinch when you're like, I don't have time to like sit here and memorize exactly what I want to talk about. But it does take some work to make sure that it comes across as genuine. The other thing that you can do is completely unscripted. If you know your content well enough and you can just get up there and talk about it, or if you're interviewing somebody, that's not going to be scripted, right? Those interview question responses are not going to be scripted. It's going to seem a little bit more genuine. And then you can have where you're like super prepared, like you know exactly what you're going to say, but you can say it in a way that you're not reading it off of a teleprompter. So it seems a little bit more engaging and interactive. And then you can also just do voice over narration, where you're filming like different shots and then you're just providing that narration over that video footage. So those are just some different ways to think about how you're scripting your video.
Hey, Danae, before you go further, I'm going to interject just some experience I've had with educational videos for our academic folks. So we've had success in combining her storyboard and scripting idea. So we might have on a sheet of paper or a PowerPoint or whatever, you've got like an outline of what the video footage is going to be. And then to the side, you have the script of what you're going to be discussing. And we tend to find academics, we like to go all over the board, right? So having at least a draft outline of the script helps to keep us focused. And that way we stay back to like your goals and your objective of the video to begin with. And that way we kind of stay on task. So just kind of throw that out for those of you that really need some hardcore content maybe that you need to get described. So.
Yeah, super, super important. I should have mentioned that. So as you think about your storyboard and sort of saying like, here's the first scene that we're going to get, right? Like for our admissions video example, the first scene is going to be the sun coming up over this person's farm. The next scene is going to be the boots walking across. The next shot is going to be them looking close up at a corn plant. You might not have any, you might have some like audio narration that plays over top of that, just providing context for who that person is. But it's a good idea to write that script out even next to that storyboard, so you know exactly what's happening in each one of those scenes. And as Dina mentioned, particularly for those videos that you know, like we have to send this very explicit message, we have to have this content, it's a good idea to have that explicitly written out. During this shot, we are going to be talking about this thing. That way, especially in post-processing, it's going to make your life a lot easier. When you go to edit that video, you know exactly the entire flow of that video. Any questions so far? For the last just few minutes here, we're going to talk about branding, because branding is important. Any questions? And I will hang back on the call. So it's about 5 to 1, right? Yeah. And I'll hang back if anybody has specific questions about anything we've gone over today. You can feel free to ask those. So for branding, we have Dina and I and others have been in communication with our branding folks in just the last 24 hours. And this is the latest information that we have about branding. All videos that we produce, whether they are for external audiences like Extension or internal audiences like Classroom Spaces, they have to be appropriately branded. And that includes the CFAES logo. It includes the CFAES tag. It includes using the appropriate colors and the appropriate fonts. Now, fortunately, we have a great CFAES brand website that outlines the explicit use of our entire brand, everything from the logo to the tag, how to make sure you're using the appropriate colors, what the appropriate fonts are. If you don't want to purchase the actual font files, the Proxima Nova and Capita font files, I think they're $105 to purchase both sets of those. And I purchased those a long time ago, back when I was a county educator, because I use them almost every single day. The reason why I like those font files is because they come in a lot of different weights of fonts. So you have not just like bold and normal or regular, you have like thin and light and regular and bold and medium bold and semi-bold and black. And you can play around with a lot of those fonts and it gives you a lot more flexibility. So if you have the $105 to spare in your departmental budget, I would recommend getting those font files because they are nice to play with. But our CFAES brand website has a ton of resources for how to use this brand appropriately. Thank you, Cassandra, for posting the CFAES brand link there to the website. There is also the university brand website at brand.osu.edu. So you can find a ton of additional resources there. You can find our secondary color palette. I think CFAES website has that as well. There is a ton of information on how to make sure you're getting the appropriate colors and using the logo correctly. The moral of the story is anytime you create a piece of content, and this is true beyond just video content, you have to make sure you get approval from our brand approval team before disseminating that piece of content. Now, for those of you working in extension, we also have to use the extension signifier, so that we have to put some way on there to signify that this is an extension content. There are now 4 primary ways to do that. We used to just be using this band. It was the Scarlet brand. And then with the CFAES tag, I think it changed to the gray band that said Ohio State University Extension in all caps. Now there's 4 different ways that we can identify extension. We can do the headline, we can do the kicker, we can do the band, and we can do the sign off. On the CFAES brand website, each one of these different ways of signifying extension or OARDC or ATI, those are all explicitly outlined, and there are examples for how we can do each of those things on the brand website. So you can play around with those things. Again, always make sure that you get approval from the brand team. And if you guys have questions about that, I would be happy to try to answer them. And if not, we can send you in the direction of our brand approval team, and somebody else on the call might be able to help with those questions too. Now we do have some, John Rice is our video lead for CFAES, and he has some video intros and outros that are branded, but they just include the logo. They do not include the tag. And as of yesterday, the brand team said they also want to see the tag on there. I anticipate, and again, I don't want to speak on behalf of John and his team, but I anticipate that we'll probably have some branded intros and outros that will be available to us in the coming months that will also include the CFAES tag. And then it's up to us to identify extension or ATI or OARDC how we can, but always just get approval from the brand team. They're pretty responsive to questions. They're very helpful in my experience. So that's what I have for you all today. You can take pieces and parts of anything that we discussed. You can apply them as you think will be helpful to the videos that you produce for either your classroom or external audiences or anything else. And I am always here and available to help with questions. So if you need me, my email address is not on here. I apologize, but you can just search my name and find me online. So what questions, comments do you have? The slides and the recording, yes, definitely the recording will be available, and I can also give you the slides as well. And Jason said, I make it seem so easy. Like I said, this can be as complicated or as easy as you want it to be. This was just kind of meant to provide you like sort of the overarching, like here's sort of the big scope of how we can tell stories using video. But you don't have to do everything that we talked about today. The biggest thing is empathizing with your audience and producing content that you think will resonate with specific audiences. In extension, we're very good at just kind of creating content for the everybody and the anybody. Which is okay sometimes, but it's also, it's best to produce content with an explicit audience in mind and with explicit goals in mind. So I hope that makes sense.
And I was just going to add to that as well. We'd encourage you to go ahead and do some storyboarding scripting for the next session, because then they'll go into more detail about how you actually go out and get the shoot. So our goal was that you might have a small video clip you might work on throughout the next few weeks. And so go ahead and do that if you've got the time. Yeah, Megan, I've got the same questions you do about branding, right? So we're going to bring the branding folks. Danae, are they coming like next week or the following week? I lost track.
I feel like I told John that the last session probably seemed more appropriate because it was about post-processing, which is where you would add the stuff. He said he was available for both sessions though. So yeah. If you want to reach out to him, or if Valerie or Chris want to reach out to him and work with him on where his part might be best included in one of the next 2 sessions, that might be best.
And
Yeah,
Danae, and this is Cheryl Buck. The other thing you can do, just for Megan and others who've asked, is there are ways to build in at the beginning and the end. That's why Danae mentioned the intros and the outros. We can often cover the branding needs, especially at the beginning and end for some of those pre-recorded things. And then you can build in more info or more branding throughout as you do other and new presentations.
Mm-hmm. Very good
And
point,
it would be
Cheryl.
helpful
Thank
to
you.
have those intros and exit video segments available. We weren't finding those anywhere online. So
we actually, that's one of the things that the video team and marketing communications are working on, is they work on an update of their brand site. But some of that is because videos can be unique. So often there needs to be some explanation or some interaction between John and his team and the person who's doing the video. So yeah, John and Cassandra wrote back, yeah, John does that. Usually he'll contact someone as soon as they contact him, but there's a little bit of a flow of information that needs to happen with some of that stuff.
So do you guys have, or are you working on, just like, because any kind of academic course stuff is going to be pretty standard. So do you have like something you're working on there that, because like, okay, my class itself, I probably could easily have 50 video clips, right? For just one class.
That's a good question for John. We'll have
Okay.
to add that to Danae's list for him. I'm not sure what he's doing with classroom work.
Yeah, last time I checked, there wasn't any. The other thing too, for those of you, I'm trying to track down some legal kind of verbiage we may need to have on some of our things. So yeah, just, if we need to say who this is a property of or that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to work through that too. So if, say, like, because I teach weeds as part of my class, so watch my students go spray their field with Roundup, and they say I told them to do it in a video, what kind of legal verbiage do we need on there? So, and it may take us a while to figure this out. I tried anyway. So long story short, if I get an answer for you during this video boot camp series, we'll let you know. But it's all good stuff. This is all great.
Yeah, thanks everybody for participating today. As I said, you guys can feel free to reach out to me for questions. Just let me know what you need.
All right, thanks a lot, Danae.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your time.